Welcome to another edition of the Sim Racing Garage. I'm Barry Rowland. In this episode, I'll be reviewing the new Ngasa Pro GT pedal set from the guys at 3Drap. Made mostly from stainless steel plate, these pedals do look to be a sturdy set. The brake is equipped with a load cell. The throttle and clutch are using a Hall sensor setup. As usual, 3Drap is using some 3D printed parts in different areas of the pedal set's build. Time to put it through the SRG's review process and see how they do. So, let's get to it. Now let's take a closer look at these Ngasa Pro pedals from the guys at 3Drap. Now, I'm pronouncing it Ngasa because it's spelled N-G-A-S-A. So, to me, that's how it sounded out. I could be saying it wrong, so for those of you who are already correcting me in the comments, thank you for your correction. Now, these pedals are made from stainless steel plate, and we have aluminum faces on them. I'll use the throttle as the close-up example. Let me push these guys back. Now, the throttle and the clutch are very, very similar. In fact, pretty much the same, except for maybe the profile back here and the spring tension they have on them. So you can see the sides here. This is all stainless. I have a magnet here, and it won't stick on any of it. It'll stick on a bolt pretty easily, but will not stick on the plates themselves or the flanges down here. It will stick here. It wobbles a bit, but it will stick there on the mounting plate. And because when you bend stainless steel and you're compressing all the metal in that bend and that crease right there, that's why we have more steel to put our magnet on. But other than that, yeah, it won't even connect to it. So we know it's stainless steel that way. Now, that gives us a nice sturdy structure to start with when the pedals are bolted all up nice and tight together like they are too, the two halves. These halves have some cutouts in them that is the 3Drap pattern. We have adjustments on the sides, and we're going to go through the adjustments as usual here at the SRG once we get to that segment. You can see we have a very large adjustment here on the slot for adjusting the angle of this pedal so we can raise the back of the body up in that slot and give us the angle we want, which is a good thing because out of the box, they're laid back pretty good, I think. So, stainless steel, hefty in the hand. The throttle weighs in at 4 pounds and 2 ounces. And that's 1.87 kilos for the rest of the world. And it's funny that these come in pretty close, but the brake comes in at 4 pounds and 1 ounce. Usually the brake is heavier on most of these pedal sets that I review. But this comes in just a little bit lighter, 4 pound 1 ounce, or 1.84 kilos. And the interesting thing is that the clutch weighs exactly the same as the brake pedal, not the throttle, but the brake pedal. So there's something different in the mechanisms here in the clutch. Just by weight, I can tell. It's probably something obvious like this aluminum up here. We have this pedal plate here. You can see on the throttle, it's much longer. So this comes in exactly the same as the brake, 4 pounds, 1 ounces, or 1.84 kilos. Again, pretty substantial when held in hand. The stainless steel plates have two different widths. These brackets here are 3 millimeters thick, and the side plates that make up the long piece here are 2 millimeters thick. And all the linkages here in these little cam units, they're coming in at 3 millimeters. So the only thing that I've found so far that's 2 millimeter is these big plates that are making up the side part of the structure. We have a very thick cable coming out for connecting to the controller, which is over there, and we'll see that in a minute. And we have some yellow, bright yellow pieces here. And being 3Drap, of course, we've got some 3D printed pieces in here, and these are obviously guides so that we don't scrape the cables on the edges of the stainless steel. I think this is stamped out stainless steel because it has some kind of sharp edges on the inside. Now on the outside, it looks like they've beveled them down to where, you know, if you're just brushing up against it, you won't cut yourself. But yeah, and you'll notice on this, let's see, as I'm turning around and showing you the guys this stuff, you see there is some scratching on this. So they took a little bit of a beating and shipping. I made a comment about that to the guys at 3Drap. I sent them an email and told them they were using a black styrofoam to put these pedals in their boxes with. And yeah, I'm surprised anybody uses styrofoam anymore, period, because it's just not very good shipping material. If a chunk breaks loose somewhere that's containing like this pedal, then you got these other pedals around it. then this pedal becomes loose because that chunk is now gone. And as it's being tossed around by the shipping guys, yeah, it starts beating up the styrofoam and making a bigger hole, which eventually works its way into these guys, and they get loose, and yeah, it just perpetuates. And next thing you know, you got kind of a Charlie Foxtrot in there when you open the box. So yeah, we got some scratching on here, but told him, I said, look, you know, at the price point of these pedals, you need to find another way to ship these or different materials. See that one there? You can see some scratching in there. And yeah, I was not impressed by that when I took it out. And hopefully, they told me they were going to change the whole way they ship these things. So hopefully they do that. But of course, there's no way for me to be positive they will. So I can just tell you what they tell me, right? That's all I can do. Right. So again, very substantial. The throttle feels pretty good. They have a really nice mechanism in here. I was surprised when I pulled it out of the box. Of course, there's all stainless steel, like I said before, but it has these little cam profile bits in here. First, we have a lever, and this is the Pro. The light, they make a light version of this that doesn't have this assembly. It doesn't have this back spring pack, I'm calling it, and it doesn't have the cam system in here, this little cam plate, and it doesn't have this lever in here connected here. What it does have, as far as I can tell from the pictures, I don't have any details. I tried to find some and I asked, but I just didn't get any. And this is the main piece in here, has a spring in it that's resting back on. Let's see, I can show you underneath here. This bar here, see that bar? You can see the spring right over here. It's sticking up there. And that's resting on this bar, which we can, by the way, adjust. So if we adjust this bar up or down, it changes the tension of the pedal that we feel in the pedal lever because of the compression or non-compression that is putting on that spring. So more compression is going to be tighter feel. If we relieve the pressure, it's going to be looser or not as quite as tight. Not a lot of adjustment there, but there is some. And we'll get to adjustments again later on. Overall build quality looks pretty good here. I'm not crazy about some of the edges and the way this, if you look at this is what I found here also. It has this little piece here in a lot of these plates. I don't know how well this is going to show up right there. And it's a protrusion. Yeah, it's kind of raised up a little bit, and it's kind of sharp. It's something I think that should have been taken care of in the manufacturing process. If you're cutting this stuff out, laser cut or whatever they're doing, yeah, you need to go ahead and get those burrs taken off, right? All right. Anything else I want to complain about here? The 3D bits here, we have this as a little stop. So when we're pushing the pedal, it stops on that. And this is a kind of an oblongish little assembly in here that has the spring in it. And of course, the spreader in here is another 3D printed part because we are dealing with 3D wrap. They love to put that stuff in there. And of course, all these little bushings here, these are all 3D printed parts. So you have to put that into the equation when you make a decision whether or not you think this is the kind of pedal construction that you would like to have. We do have Hall sensors, very good. I really like that. And they're contained in these 3D printed pieces here. These are not load bearing, so I don't really have a problem with that. But I do like how thick the cabling is that comes out of here. It should give very good protection to the wires inside from just anything going on. And I can't say that it's shielded because I haven't taken it apart, but it would be nice if it were, but I'm kind of thinking it may not be. But anyway, it's a nice thick cable. Quick look at the brake. Well, let's take a quick look at the clutch because you can see the clutch is about identical to the throttle. The plates are the same. Let's see if I can get this in the frame here. You can see the adjustments would be the same. Where the wires are coming out, it's the same. Well, it's opposite sides, but they're both the same plate because you can see we got a plug in this one and we've got a grommet over here on this one. And of course the grommet's on the other side of the throttle on this. So they're actually the same. But they do feel a little different because these cams in here, the profile for the cams are different. Let's go ahead and get this out of the way. But again, when we get to the adjustments, we'll talk about that stuff. All right, so this is the brake pedal. And it has a load cell in here. You can see a little piece of metal in there. That's where the load cell is. And all of this structure in here is 3D printed. PTEG maybe, I can't be sure. But again, I don't have any problem with this, you know, holding the pressure from the load cell. It's only a 100 kilogram load cell in here. So I'm not sure exactly what pressure we're putting on it as far as the ratio of the leverage to the load cell. I don't have any numbers for that, but it should be okay, I think. The only thing that I'm not sure about is when you're pressing on this brake pedal, this lever in here, there's a lever internal here. You can see the bottom of it sticking out here. Where is it? There it is. And I'll try to get a better look. And of course, it's right. You can see the metal part through their little logo cut out. And there's the top of it. And it goes straight down. And you can see that it goes straight down into the bumper, the material they're using for the bumper, right down in here. And that is another 3D printed piece. TPA, or TPU rather, not TPA. So we've got a TPU piece there. By the way, all this other yellow stuff seems to be TPU also. So that's the bumper we're using. And we have some selection of bumpers over here, and we'll look at those again when we get to the brake pedal adjustments. So I'm not sure about the durability of something like this. I'm sure it works, and I won't know until I'm actually using it to see how well it works. But yeah, that's how they decided to go. And I'm sure it does work. Obviously, we're pressing on a bumper, and the pressure is going to be transferred over to our load cell over here, and of course out the cable, so that the load cell amplifier circuit over there in the box, the controller box, is going to handle all that for us. This is a 16-bit load cell, by the way. Very nice. And by the way, the hall sensors on these, the clutch and the accelerator or throttle, are 12-bit. So pretty decent resolution, I would think. The most we'd expect from a pedal set in general. So that's okay there. I do like the overall construction here. And I think it's kind of a neat way they've done this with this cam lever system in here. And all of this stuff is rotating on bearings. These are sealed bearings. See little slots in there, around there? That's the seal for the sealed bearings that they're running. And they're running on all of them. All of them are the same kind of way, with the pros anyway. Of course, like I said before, the lights don't have this assembly. They just have the spring pack up front here, and they don't have the rear spring pack that provides another ball bearing. While we're talking about it, that ball bearing there, and of course that's what this little cam is rolling on. And all of these are seal bearings, so it's a very smooth action. I do like that. First time I've seen that in a pedal set, so it's something different, and I always enjoy reviewing something different at the SRG instead of the same old stuff, right? It's just a little more interesting for me. Oh, one thing I wanted to show you here is this front plate that is on this one but not the others. This is a heel rest, so if you put this pedal on some profile or whatever you're going to mount it to, that your heel can rest against this and not interfere with the spring pack. That's what I'm calling it anyway. The pivot point up here that has the 3D printed spacer and the spring embedded in it. So that keeps your heel from hitting that and interfering with it. Now, if you get one of their base plate setups, which they have too, they got an F1 and GT, then this is unnecessary because it has a lip on the plate that will keep your foot from sliding into it integrated. So you don't have to worry about that. But if you don't, and you're going to mount on something separate, that's what these are. And you get, I got a couple more of them sitting over here. I just put that one on to show you what it's all about. This is the cam system. All right, so they call this, what do they call this? I'm just calling it the cam system. They have a word for it, a marketing word for it. But again, very nicely done here. You can see seal bearings. So that's essentially what you're going to do here to try this cam. Now, these come with what they're calling a standard cam installed. Now, the throttle cam, I was looking at this a little while ago, and the throttle cam seems to be a little different than, where's my clutch? My clutch cam. Looking at it again while I'm talking to you here. And yeah, it's a little bit different profile on these. It's a little bit more shallow on this one. So when the bearing comes back into the shallower part, it doesn't have as much of a feel to it as far as pushing back on you as this one does. This one has more of a pushback, which is on purpose because they're trying to emulate a pressure plate in a clutch pack, right? So when you're pushing on it, it wants to push back on you a little bit. It actually does a pretty decent job. Anyway, these are changeable. You take this bolt here loose, and again, we'll get adjustments later, and you take this bolt loose, and then obviously there's two holes there that the bearings are sitting in. I think you can see the bearing in between here. You can see a little bit of it there on either side of that plate. And then we would put, obviously, this one in and bolt everything back together, and we have a different profile. Now, these are supposed to be interchangeable with the throttle and the clutch, depending on the feel you want, which is fine. You know, set up it any way you want to. as long as it's comfortable to you and that's what you want. Now, they call this C90s, which is the classic 90s. I'm not even sure what they mean by that, but it's supposed to give you, I imagine, a classic 90s feel. They also sent me one here, and this is called the Vintage. Get that turned around right. So a T Vintage. I'm not sure what the T is for, but this is the Vintage one. And it does have a different profile. As you can see, this one's rounded off on this part of it right here. And this one, obviously, is completely different. So again, you can switch them out. And I would imagine, because the spacing is the same between these levers, you could switch these out. You could take the throttle one and put it over in the clutch too if you wanted to. So you can play around with it. Something else to use for adjustments. What else are we going to look at here? Let me wipe my hands off here before I grab these nice, clean, pretty yellow bumpers. We have two different bumpers here, and we'll talk about these again when we get to adjustments. One's got a hole in it, and one doesn't. And it has an H on the top of it. See if you can see that. It's not probably not easy because of the bright color here. But you can see that one's a hole in it. So we'll check the shore rating on these with my durometer when we get there. See if they're different, if at all. You also get some wrenches in here to work on your pedals. You get some bolts for mounting, and you get some T-nuts for mounting. Very nice, they put some T-nuts in there. What else are we going to talk about? Oh, let's go ahead and talk about the controller box here. And you can see that these have the counter 4-pin plug for the plugs that are on every one of the pedals. And these are decent pedals. I mean, rather plugs, rather, not pedals. And they are 5-pin. And they do have a groove on the top of the plastic part here. On the bottom in this case. You see a little groove. And of course, there's a key in each one of these right here that fits into that. So you can't put it in the wrong way. And of course, we have clutch, brake, and throttle. Pretty simple stuff here. We have a USB-A cable here. It will plug into the PC or your hub, whatever the case may be. Yeah, and yeah, there's really not much to do here with this. This is a kind of, looks like a plexiglass. This has been etched a little bit. Of course, it's got the 3Drap logo on it. And yeah, it's got a little warning here. You want to see what that says. While you're playing, don't stick your fingers into the pedals. Sound advice on any pedal set, I would imagine. And again, we'll have to wait and see how this works once we get it all hooked up. One thing they also sent me, and this is another accessory, and they call these things the ergonomic pads. If you don't want to use these plates, let's see, which one's this for? I believe this is the clutch, and this is the clutch over here. So you would stick this on the plate. Now, I've got one taken apart to show you a little bit easier what I mean by that. And this is like a sticky silicone material here that's been poured into, it looks like, this 3D printed piece. And you'll take this part, you can see it has two screws here, two flatheads. You pull both of those out, it separates. Then we have this aluminum plate back here, which has countersunk holes in it. And you would mount that here, like that. Then you would put this back on, right? So now you have this big pad that has sticky on it. And they show this on their website. And we have one for the brake pedal, by the way. Big fat one here. This definitely changed the whole look of the pedals if you had all this stuff on there. And they say this is a great way to use their, and they sent me a pair of these socks. This is their sim racing socks from 3Drap. And it's got these little grippy rubber pieces on the bottom of it. So the combination of these rubber grippy pieces and the silicone here, or the pad that's silicone, should, and it does. I just felt that, yes, it does have a good grip on this pad here. If you just kind of try to wipe it across there. And these silicone things, they're probably going to get dirty, especially wearing socks and lint and stuff flying around dirt. But it's very easy to clean these off. I already cleaned one off. You just take it and run it under water, like running water off a faucet or something, or spray it, whatever, and it just washes off any of the dirt that was sticking to it. So it comes clean pretty easily. It's not very high maintenance. If you want to drive with your socks or you just want a bigger plate, I wouldn't think that I would want one of these on my throttle because that's just too sticky and it wouldn't slide like this would slide if you're wearing shoes. But maybe for socks, if you're into that kind of thing. What else do we have? We got some information about how to adjust the pedals here in these little pamphlets. Let's see which one. I got a couple of base ones. Now I do have two bases I'm going to show you in the mounting section. We have an F1 base and we have the GT base. We have both of them. I'll be using the GT. So you can we'll take a look at those and see how they go together. They seem to be pretty sturdy. And we also have the pedals manual. We have two of them actually. And one of them is for, I think, both the throttle and the clutch because they're so similar. Yes. There we go. Throttle and clutch. And then the other one probably is the brake because that's the only one left. And let's see. Yes. This talks about the brake pedal. There you go. And they have some videos on their site that show animations of how to make adjustments, all the adjustments that are available anyway. So I think that's about it. Again, I'm not going to cover the base plates until we get to the mounting segment where we'll start putting these on the base plates and we'll look at the assembly of those and how they work. But yeah, there's our closer look. Thought I'd go through the throttle adjustments first. And the throttle adjustments and the clutch adjustments are identical. They're both basically the same pedal with different profiles in their cams. We have a clutch cam here and we have the throttle cam here. And if you watch the closer look segment, I was pondering, you know, they call this the Victory or Vintage. Yeah, they were calling this the Vintage cam, and this was the 90s cam for the clutch. And I was thinking you could interchange these because the centers on these, where the bearings are and the bolts go in, are exactly the same. And you could use them because they're the same pedal, but you wouldn't like the feel of the clutch cam on your throttle. It's just kind of strange feeling. You want a smooth throttle throw, and that's why the cam is shaped like this for the throttle and like this for the clutch, even though you could still experiment if you wanted to. So put the clutch over here, and the first thing we'll talk about is the pedal faces, and there's 3 bolts on the throttle. We have one down here and we have 2 up there. And I'm going to go ahead and get the right wrench, which is a 3mm hex wrench, and go ahead and loosen these and take this off so we can take a look at what's going on in here. Now the bottom screw is a short one, looks like to be an M5. And of course it's a flathead, so it can fit into the counter sunk holes that we have on the plate. Go ahead and put that in the magnetic dish over there so we don't lose anything. And the top ones here are kind of long. And if you look, before I get too far with that, this 3D printed piece here has some bolt-shaped or hex-shaped holes in it that hold the bolts. Around the bolts, but the nuts. So it keeps the nuts from turning, so you don't have to put a wrench on the back of them. So I want to show you that. Chances are these are going to fall out once I get these bolts out. I'm anticipating that. No big deal, because it's easy to get them back in. We'll go ahead, now we got the top loose. Let's go ahead and get the bottom. We'll get the top loose. I'm going to pull this bottom one out first so it doesn't go crazy on me and try to flip around. And yeah, you can even see as I'm pushing on the back here, see how the nut is coming out? So just be mindful of that. That's all. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and take it off because I know it's going to fall eventually. I'll just put it over the dish over there. And that way I don't lose it, right? When it does fall, it's going to guarantee you it will roll off this bench, and I'm going to go looking around underneath and trying to find the thing and wondering how it got off to where it ended up. I'm going to pull them out here. Again, very long screws there. Same 5mm screw and the same flathead configuration, obviously, so that we can have a flush fit into our countersunk holes. This is a 4mm thick aluminum plate, very stiff, obviously. Yeah, got some holes cut in it, nothing fancy. The top piece that supports our pad, if you will, that supports the face, has 3 holes in it, and the bottom one has 2 holes in it. And they all have threads in them. And these are 3D printed pieces here, as you can see. And that looks like they got some threaded inserts that go into these. Looking at the back there. Yeah, you can see in the back there. See this metal? We can take this. I had it on the highest one because that's where I'm going to be running this pedal set. There are 3 here, so we have 2 holes. That means we can drop down 2 holes, and that's what this bottom hole down here is for, so that I can put it in a lower configuration. I'm going to be running it higher. Now, while I have this off, I thought it was a good idea to show you guys. They sent me these ergonomic pedal pads, and they have some flathead screws in them. I've already got it loose. I'm going to pull them out, not lose them. And these are M3 flatheads. Put them over there. And the pad separates from the aluminum plate. Again, a 4mm aluminum plate. Now, if you saw a closer look, they call these the ergonomic pads or ergo pads, and they're primarily based on using socks. So you can use your socks on the throttle and the brake and the clutch if you want to drive that way. In fact, if you didn't see the closer look, they have these 3Drap makes these socks that I guess they want you to buy these things if you want to race in your socks. And they have these rubber, sticky silicone kind of rubber pads embedded into the fibers. And when put against this silicone pad, which is kind of sticky, then yeah, you get some positive grip there. You can feel it as soon as you rub it across there. So we would take this plate after we pulled them apart. I'm going to look at the orientation, the way I want to go with this. And we want them to kind of obviously line up so we can get this bolted back on properly. And you can see we have 3 holes here. And if I put the 3 holes in there and try to line it up, it doesn't quite work. Let's see. Yeah, I guess it does. I was thinking this one was sticking out in the bottom, was sticking out too much, but you can get it flush against there. So we can use all 3 of the holes. I think, let me look down here. So if it's sitting like this with all 3 of the holes, there's no real gap under that pedal there. I don't see, there's a little bit of air, not much to make a difference. I think you could tighten it down and be fine. But the thing is, you can only use 2 bolts anyway. And the reason is, this short one doesn't go far enough to grab one of the nuts that would be in one of the holes in the back, right? So we can't use that. So we can only use 2 anyway. We use the 2 long ones. And we'll put this up here like this. I believe that was the proper orientation, wasn't it? Check it one more time. There it is. And we'll just use this 3 holes, but we can only use 2 at once, and that allows us to raise the pedal up to here, or push it back down to here, or go down that low. So we actually have 3 adjustments on this. And of course, we would just put our bolts in. We go get our nuts and stick them on the back and get them in the right orientation, or turn them so they will fit properly into the holes, and you can tighten them down. Then we'll come back with this pad, set it up here, and then we'll put our M3s back in. And they would secure this pad to the aluminum pad to give us a nice solid base to reinforce the 3D printed material, which feels pretty solid. But you know, it's got a hollow piece out here where they poured, it looks like they poured the silicone in there. Well, that's showing up. So they left a cavity in here to support that. Kind of clever, actually. But this, I think this is PETG. It's pretty stiff. So again, once we have this mounted there, then we're good to go. But that's a big pedal plate, isn't it? Not something you'd want to be using with shoes because it would stick too much, obviously. But I wanted to show you guys how that looked. All right. Seeing as how we're not going to be doing anything with the clutch pedal as far as adjustment, because it'd be the same thing, just a different pad. The clutch pad is one pointing the other way. So it would go like this on the clutch, right? So you got them pointing towards each other. So it looks good, right? Everything's flowing. I'll go ahead and put my screws back over there. So let's talk about the adjustments we have on this, which are identical again to what we have on the clutch. We have the angle adjustment bracket back here, so we can change the angle, which we're going to need because this puppy is laid back. And I'm going to want it almost straight up from when I use them. But we have enough room there to do that. Loosen a bolt here, bolt there, they slide down, you're done. Now, you also want to loosen up these 2 front brackets because the angle of the bracket will be different when it makes contact flat. And you can see how this one's sticking up. So you'd have to change the angle on that one too. Loosen up that bolt, the other bolt, and you're done. Get them so it's sitting flat in the right angle you want, tighten everything down. Easy, right? Now, there is a stop adjustment down here, and I'm going to flip this around so you can see it. This is a TPU printed piece, as are all the yellow pieces, I imagine. And there is it acts as a stop. Well, I can show you how this is working. But there's a ramp shape to this front piece in here. I'm going to move it around so you can see a little bit. And it kind of curves down this way. Yeah, I think from the bottom you might be able to see it too. Maybe not that great. Trying to figure out a best way for you guys to see how this is working. All right, so there's the stop and there's that cam profile. I'm going to squeeze this together. See if I can show you guys where it's hitting it. There, like that. It goes down and hits it. And I've got it all the way back. So it allows the most amount of travel on the pedal. This is where I want it. Now I can just unscrew this side screw. Whoops, this one. And of course go around to this side. and then I could move it back and forth. Now, you may have to loosen up some of these other bolts to give enough, relieve enough pressure on the side plates to get it to move. You may or may not. It depends. But you have to be careful, because once you have your spring adjustment set, you don't want to be messing with that too much, because it's not the easiest thing to get set in the first place. But it's doable. And I'll show you why in just a second here. So again, the stop here, easy enough to figure out. Oh, and before we get there, we'll also talk about this. This is a typical kind of adjustment you'll see on a pedal lever, where we have different holes or slots or whatever. And the lower we go into the pedal lever, the easier it is to push with the same spring or resistance settings. All we're doing is changing this. And at the same time we do that, the pedal is going to move forward a little bit, because you can see as I come down, this whole lever, pedal lever, has to move forward to accommodate the difference in the distance on those holes from the center of this little piece in here. You can see it right there. That has again, a bearing in it. So that as that center changes, it has to come forward. Not a whole lot, but some. Not enough for me to be able to have it straight up and down like that. In fact, that's not what that adjustment is for. It's primarily to give you easier push on the pedal, and just another way to adjust the tension or feel. Now, we have a front spring stop here. We have one in the back, and I have them adjusted currently at the highest positions. And they can be a little finicky to get adjusted. I'm going to show you this back one here. You can see the spring is resting on this metal bar, which is also acting as a spreader. And it is in slots. Let's turn around this way, you can see it better. These slots here accommodate this bolt moving back and forth. So I have it pushed all the way down. If you see where the side of the spring it's pushing on, that means I have it at the tightest configuration, or the most tension when I push on it. And that's what I want. And I can loosen both sides of these, and it's easy to take tension off, because the spring here is going to assist you, whether you want it to or not, to push this thing further up in the slot. And the same thing's going to happen over here. That spring is going to be pushing against this, so it's going to want to take off on you as soon as you get it loose. So it's not the easiest thing to fine tune. It's kind of a finicky thing. And I'll show you on the back, because it's easier to see, but the same principle applies with the front one. And what I'm going to do is get a 4mm wrench, hex wrench, and this is a regular type, and this one is a ball end. And I'm going to get on both sides of these bolts, because that's the way you have to do it. Now, you may have to loosen some of these other bolts to get that to move freely, but because I have spring tension on it, I'm curious to see if it'll go ahead and just push it up once I get it loose. I'm going to do that right now. And this is a one-piece bar that has threads on both ends, so you got to do it on both ends. You can't just unscrew one side. Okay, that's got it pretty loose. And one side moved, and one side, well, I guess they both moved a little bit. You can see they actually moved a little bit, and I can push this. Because I have the spring assist, it's not that hard. Now, I don't even have to tighten it up to feel the difference there, because the spring is pushing up on it, and it's not going to go any higher than it is now, so I can feel the difference. And you know, it's hard to tell on the bench, obviously, pushing with your hand on a pedal, but yeah, it's hard to tell whether that's where I would want it to be. But again, totally subjective, depends on what you like. Now, the real reason I want to show you this is, now I want to, let's say I want to get it tighter, the tension on this. That means I got to push it down in the slot. And when I push it down in the slot, it's going to be pushing against the spring. So that provides spring tension, and I have to get on both sides of it here, and grab the bolts by the heads there, and push down on them. And it's not too bad, actually. That spring doesn't have a ton of tension. The front was more difficult because it had more tension on it. It was harder to push. But not too bad. You can push it down in there. But there is, you can see it pop, but it just pops back up though. I push it down, and I'll show you one side. I push it down like this. If I take, it's down there. But if I take my hand off the spring, see what happens? So we have to tighten it while it's down there. So the idea is, I'm going to try to hold. The easiest way I found to do this, especially if the pedal is mounted, right? I mean, you could do things like, let's see, I'll take this little wrench, nut driver. It's got a hollow piece in the middle there for the nut to fit into. And I could actually take this, if I had it upside down, and put this on the spring and just pull the spring back and adjust it where I want it to. But that means it has to be off the chassis, right? I got to be holding it to do that. So I don't want to do that. I want to do it in the car or the chassis. I don't want to have to take the pedal off, obviously. So what I'm going to do instead is, if you look down in there, you can see the bar, right? I'm going to take this guy and go in down there where the bar is and kind of just give it a little push while I try to tighten it from the outside. Because if I have this pushed down like this, well, like this, and then I'm going to try to hold it there while I get my wrench, or I could use my wrench actually to help push it down. And I could do that. In fact, let me try it that way. But it's when I do that, the other side kicks up. If I have it down. Well, let me go ahead and push it back down. Yeah, it's not going to be easy to show you guys this. I'll try to show you over here. If I push this down, see how it wants to pop back up as soon as I take my finger off of it. Because the bar is, you're doing this to the bar basically. So that's why it's doing that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just barely touch the side with this side. Go ahead and push it down. Try to hold it and then use the wrench, pushing down with the wrench at the same time, and then turn it while I'm holding the one over here with my finger. And try to see if I can get that, stay down and tighten it. So this one, we might be able to get away with it. All right. All right, so that side is down. Not all the way though. You can see there's still a little bit of gap in there on the bottom, see? And this side here is almost the same. So what I'm going to do is go over here and do the same thing. Put my palm on it and try to push it down a little bit. And then kind of leave it there as I'm turning it. Again, kind of finicky. And remember, if I'm in the cockpit, or these pedals are mounted to my cockpit, guess what? I'm not going to have all this free room in between here to use something like this. So again, yeah, I think the best approach would be to come in with something like this, push down on it, get in here, while I'm tightening it so it doesn't want to move on me. I can get it to, looks like one side I got a little more room than the other. Okay. Doesn't really matter as long as I'm putting pressure on it. So I'm going to loosen that up. In fact, I'm going to go back and loosen the other side too, because I want this thing to go further down if it's possible. But we're going to try. So I'm going to push down on that bar, get it down as far as I can get it. And another problem here is that as we're turning counterclockwise on this bolt head, it wants to climb in the slot. That's just what it wants to do. And I've taken up a lot of the space that was in there on the bottom, but there's still a little bit. I think you can see it in there. So now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, push down on it, and tighten it up. But again, I can do this with it mounted to the pedals, or rather to my base plate. Now I've got this down, I think, as far as I can get it. And again, I'm pushing down a little bit as I'm doing the tightening. And this is where a ball socket wrench also is helpful, because you can get a little angle on it. All right, see how we did. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Not much. There's a little bit left in that slot there, but not much. I'll go over and look at that. Same way over here, a little bit, maybe just a smidge more over here. But the important part is I've changed the tension. Now it feels a little bit more where I think I would want it. But again, you can't be sure until you get it underfoot. Those are the most difficult changes to make on the throttle and the clutch, because the spring's pushing back against you. Now, if you're going to loosen the tension, easy peasy, right? But when you're going to put tension on it, then it becomes a little more difficult. I could still do the same thing. In this one on the front, I have a lot of tension on the spring right now, I believe, yeah. Because it's in the top of the slot, it's a little different than the one on the back. The one on the back is tighter when it goes down. The one on the front, tighter when it goes up. So I've got it all the way. You can see there's no slot left in there on the top. So I got it as tight as I can get it on the front. But it wasn't easy to do. And I had to get in here and with another wrench. I got this little thing and reached in here and got the top of that spring, which you can do once it's mounted. So you're just kind of just going into the side like that. And this helps take pressure. I can actually get it on that spring in there. Well, see how that, and I can actually push back on the spring just by using my hand here, grabbing the rest of the pedal, and take tension off that spring so I can make that adjustment. That's what I came up with anyway. So to make it tighter though, and then you got to hold it there while you're tightening it down, just like we did on the other side. And again, you may have to take a couple of these bolts loose to get the thing to move at all. Because once you get everything cinched down by design, none of the stuff's going to move, right? It's going to be too tight. These plates are going to be drawn in so tight that we can't move anything around. So that's the basic 4 adjustments for the throttle pedal and the clutch, because they're exactly the same except for the pedal face up here. And of course the cam profiles are different. And what we'll do is when I come back, I'll do a cam change or cam profile change in the throttle and show you how we do that before we get to the brake. Now I'm going to show you how to switch out the cam profile plates. And this will be for the throttle. I'm not going to show you the clutch because it's exactly the same thing, so there's no need to do it twice. The centers on these bearings, as I said before, on both of these plates exactly the same because the pedals are the same as far as clutch and throttle go, and the profiles make the difference as far as the feel goes in both of them. Now, if you watched a closer look, you saw that I showed you these profile cams, and I said this was the classic 90s, and I was debating whether, and this is the vintage, if you look at it this way, the vintage. Well, this one says T for throttle. I did some more research, and the C is for clutch. Although, I was pondering whether you could switch these out between the clutch and the throttle, and you could because obviously the centers are the same, and the rear spring assemblies in these pedal sets are the same. So of course they would work, but it probably wouldn't feel very good as a throttle with using a clutch profile. So that would be for the clutch. Although you could experiment, you might like it, who knows. So what I'm going to do is take the throttle, vintage throttle profile, and replace it with what they call the standard profile that's in there already. Simple thing to do here. We have 2 bolts that we're going to have to disassemble. We have one here, and we have one over here. And we'll go ahead and do that now. Now, when you take this apart, you want to make sure that you pay attention to what's going on here. And just like any kind of pedal that is assembled with the plates sandwiching everything else in between them, and we tighten all these bolts down to give it that structural integrity, you may have to loosen some of these bolts a little bit to get something loose and get it out. So what I'm going to do is loosen these 2 back bracket bolts while I pull this out and see if it'll make it easier. I'm for sure going to do it pushing it back in because I know it's going to be a little bit stiffer coming. It always is when it goes in. Then, you know, taking things apart is always a little bit easier, it seems. Anyway, let's go ahead and get this done. We do have nuts on the other side of this. It's not bolt heads. So this is an acorn nut here. These are 8mm, so you need 8mm wrench for this. And we have one here, and of course we have one here on this yoke configuration here that attaches to the pedal lever. And you want to pay attention to what's going on when you take these apart. In this, where the yoke is, I'm calling it a yoke because it goes on both sides. Kind of straddles the back of the cam bearing back here. And there's a washer here, and there's a washer internal that's sitting on the bearing itself in here. You want to make sure that you pay attention to all this stuff when you're taking it apart. So when you put it back together, you don't mess it up and have to take it apart and go, oh my gosh, I messed it up. Take it back apart and do it right. I've done that a few times. All right, so let's go ahead and get this loose. Again, I'll go ahead and use this one. We have an 8mm wrench, and we'll be putting that on this acorn nut back here. And I'm going to go ahead and just loosen it up. In fact, I could take the acorn nut all the way off. There's our acorn nut. We have a washer on this side. I can see that, so I'm going to go ahead and pull that off. And just a small washer. Nothing special going on there. Now remember, there is spring tension on this cam because we have this ball bearing follower that's putting tension on this. So when we manipulate the pedal, it follows the profile, and you can feel that in the stroke. So that might hinder you a little bit. Not a big deal. You can just I can actually take this thing actually and put it back here because it'll fit between this spreader bar and the spring bearings there. A little slot there, see that? I can just put that in there and pull the pressure back and see if it'll pop out. So I'm actually going to do it without doing that first and see if I can get it loose. And as I'm pulling it, I can see the spring section here is going to move. I think it'll, yeah, there we go. Popped right out. Now going back in is probably not going to be as easy from personal experience of working with equipment in general. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull this side off of the bolt and pull the bolt out. And what we have here are some spacers. We have an aluminum sleeve that goes on like this. And then we have this 3D printed spacer. And it has kind of a bevel on it on the top. You want to pay attention to that because that points to the outside of the pedal. And then I'm going to leave the bolt in the other side so it doesn't, I can always look at this if I forget and see and remember exactly how it's supposed to go. And the way it works is this washer is going to be up against the socket head cap, and then that's the space we're going to need to press it back into the plate slots here. So yeah, good reference there. Now we have it loose. It's flopping around here, and we're going to take this other bolt out. And again, we have the 8mm nut on the other side. There are some washers involved here, like I just said, and you're going to be careful that they don't go flying anywhere. Just like anything else when you're taking it apart, you just want to be mindful of what's going on. Just take a look at it instead of just grabbing bolts and, you know, taking the power driver out and ripping bolts out of things. You know, you do need to take a little bit of attention or care on how these things come apart. And this is sliding right out. Okay, that's good because I can show you this. Kind of anyway. Let me spread these washers back out if I can. I can't. There we go. So that's the situation there. You can see the inside washers are going to be up against that bearing. And then we have an outside washer on the outside of our plate over here on this yoke. Simple stuff, really. But you just want to pay attention to that when you take things apart and not lose any washers when you take them apart also. So I'll put my nut over here. I'm just going to kind of tilt this around over and drop the washers in my glove. Put them over there. And then I can just pull this out, set it up straight. So again, it reminds me how these things are supposed to go back together. Now here's the profile, the standard one I took out. And we'll put that against, line the centers up here. The other profile. Get the centers lined up. There we go. All right. So you can see the difference there. This has the vintage has a more pronounced lobe right there. So that's the difference in the profile. How it's going to feel, who knows? You have to put it on to find out. That's the only way you can do it. So now it's essentially going back in. And I'll put my bolt back in. You want to make sure you orient it correctly when you put it in, because it's easy to get one of these in and go, oh crap, it's backwards. So I'm going to go ahead and put my other inside washer on. I'm not going to put the outside washer on yet, because I'm going to try to get this in like this. You can just take your thumb and pull on this piece here where it is actually the pivot point. There's a bearing in there also, and just kind of push it out and then catch it with your bottom finger. All right, so we're going to slide this down in between here, so you guys can see what's going on here. And again, I'm trying to maintain my washer spacing. Can be a little fiddly. I think we can get this done. There we go. Okay, it's going in, and now I need to put another washer on the other side and that nut. So I'm going to kind of hold it there with my fingers while I grab the other washer, put it on there. Then I'm going to grab my 8mm nut, not the acorn one, the other one. And once I have this spun on, I'm good to go. Couldn't be easier, right? So now I'm going to put this part back in. And of course, it's already configured correctly for one side, and I'm going to push it through the plate first. And then I'm going to come in with my sleeve, aluminum sleeve here. And then I'll put that 3D printed spacer piece. And remember, the beveled piece points towards the outside of the brake pedal. And then I'll have my washer on here. Now, I need a room, obviously, between the bolt head and the washer, like this, to get it to slide down into that metal plate slot here. All right, gotta have room for that. So I'm gonna focus on this side first and see if I can get it in. Now also, now I'm pushing against this cam down here, so I'm gonna relieve that pressure a little bit. In fact, you know what? It's probably easier just to take this off and try to, instead of holding it all together, and get it in that way. Well, I at least gotta have the spacer on here. All right, so I'm gonna lean this back so I can get that cam to drop down at the same time I'm pushing on it. And again, got to make sure your washers and your spacers are in the right orientation. Okay, so Now that's not interfering with anything. And let's see if I can get it to go. There we go. All right. I got it to sit down there. Now it's kind of sticking out a little bit more than it should. The bolt is. You see it there. I can pull this out. Don't need this anymore. So I'm just going to kind of screw this bolt in, and that'll give me more threads on the other side over here. So I can go ahead and get my other washer on. I'm not really tightening anything when I do that. I'm just kind of walking the bolt over to the other side so I have more thread exposed on this side. Put my washer on. Acorn nut. And then before I touch the pedal or move it or anything, I want to make sure I get at least this tight so it doesn't pop out on me. That would not be good. Okay, there we go. And I'm just going to snug it up right now. I might come back and retighten it a little bit more later. And while I'm going to do this one this way. I'm going to grab the top bolt and just screw that in like that. All right. Now, if we did everything right, it should move and not bind up. And there it is. And yeah, you know what it's doing? It's putting more pressure. It's still a smooth stroke, but it's putting more spring pressure back on the pedal. And that makes sense because remember that profile is sticking out further than this one is as far as the radius is on this profile. So this one's, what we're having here now is stuck out further. So it's putting more tension on the spring assembly back here where we have our follower bearing. So it's pushing it further back because it's a larger profile that way. And that's causing more pressure on the pedal. And I kind of like it compared to this one. Of course, I won't know for sure until I get it underfoot, but you know, doing your arm and your leg with your foot attached are two different things. A lot more pressure and weight with your leg pressing on it. So it's kind of misleading to do it on the bench until you get it mounted and you put your foot on it. But I think I'm going to leave that in there because, yeah, I think I like that. Oh, again, I might have to change it once I get it up there if I don't like it. So there it is. Very simple procedure. Just have to take your time, pay attention to the orientation of everything as you're taking it off. And remember that you might have to loosen some bolts to get this piece out of the slots in the side plate. Or maybe one up here. You might have to loosen one up here, but you don't want to loosen these guys. If you've already set your spring tension on these things, now I might actually loosen the spring tension on this because of the cam change. But yeah, these are not the easiest thing to do. If you saw the adjustments segment just before this, yeah, these can be a little finicky trying to get the pressure of the spring off of this bar and get it pushed where you want it and then tighten everything back down at the same time. But you know, obviously it's doable because you saw that I did it. But yeah, I don't want to mess with these if I don't have to. Now, relieving the pressure is one thing. If I have it all the way down now, which the back one is, and the front one is, I have the most pressure I can on these springs, then I could come back up a little bit if I want to fine tune what I just did with this cam here. A lot of tunability here. Not the easiest thing to tune. I mean, as far as the spring parts, the rest of it's easy. But yeah, it's just one of those things that, yeah, it is what it is when you have pedals and you're trying to tune them. Let's look at the adjustments we have in the brake pedal. The first thing is the lever. We have 3 holes here. And as we lower the pivot point right here on the lever, in each of these holes as we go down, it does 2 things. The angle of the pedal will move forward, and it will give us more leverage on the bumper down here when we're pushing on it, so it should make it a little bit easier to push on it. Also, on the bottom, you can see this TPU bumper here, and what that does is put pressure on this lever, which is actually pushing up against the bumper right now. And that's a preload adjustment, so right now there's no preload because it's all the way up against the bumper. If I want to change that, you can see they have the slots here. I would back this down in its slot. I'm going to do that, and to do that, obviously, we have to take an M4 metric wrench on each one of these socket head cap bolts, loosen it up, and then we can move it. And that's going to give me some space on that lever before it actually makes contact. I'm just going to take it off a little bit. I can get this. I think I just got to loosen this other side a little bit more. There we go. And that actually went a little bit further than I wanted it to. So I'm going to kick it up just a hair here. Go ahead and tighten them back down a little bit here. I don't know if that's where I'm going to end up having it. But now you can see I have a gap in here. The air in there now. And of course, when I press on the pedal lever, I've got a little bit of take up there now before I actually engage the bumper. So that's how you would adjust that. And the other adjustment we're concerned with, there's two really. The bumper itself, obviously, swapping out the bumpers. We have this adjustment where we can move this whole load cell assembly here, this 3D printed bit. You can see there's the spreader in between that holds these two plates here, and these bolts right here go through it. That spreader really doesn't have anything to do with this part. It slides up in its own channels. I'm going to show you what I mean by that. I'm going to go ahead and take these side brackets off. And you don't have to do that to adjust it and up and down, but I want to show you guys what's going on. And we're also going to have to loosen this part. See, I'm going to go ahead and take these off. And they have that key on the top of them, so you can just take it where the bolt head is and take them off very easily. Of course, I wouldn't be doing this if I had them mounted to my cockpit, because, yeah, you know, it's just you don't have the room to get to what you need to do that. You'd have to take it off and then do it. Here we have the unit that moves up and down. You can see it has a channel on each side of this plates. And we have a little guide plate in here, this metal plate here, that's actually right behind the load cell. And we'll see that once we get the bumper off. And this can move up and down. Watch it go up there. Oh, see how this is loose? These bolts are as loose as I can get them. And it's still having trouble moving, but you can make it go. And it's going to be a lot easier once I loosen another part, though. In fact, you should probably do that anyway, I guess. And that what I'm talking about is this right here. This point. See how it has these slots it sits in? Now, when this is tight together, and when you should have it tight when you have the brake pedal in its regular orientation, because it makes it stiff, just like the clutch and the throttle over there. But yeah, it's too tight to move it right now. So we're going to have to loosen this up. Now, the only deal with that is once we loosen this, because we have the spring pack in here, in the pivot point, it's going to pop forward. It's going to want to come out of there, and then we're going to have to put it back in. And you can see we have a system of spacers here, and we have a washer on the outside, on each side. So you have to line all that up to push it back in. But I'm going to go ahead and loosen that up with these M4 wrenches. And it should pop out of there. And I can also show you the lever better on how it's functioning. If I can get this 4 in here. There we go. It popped right up. Now, there's the lever. I want to show you this because we want to keep this flat part, or the flatter part, against the bumpers in here. And that'll make more sense as I go along here. Now that I have this loose, though, like this, and it's still kind of hanging down in here, now I should be able to move this part, because I have it loose, at will. Or at least much easier than it was before. And you can see it is. Now I can take it and slide it up and down. But you don't want to slide it all the way up inside the groove, because if you do that, when this goes back in and engages, it's going to be hitting on this curved part of the lever, which means you're not engaging fully the face of the bumper that's in here, which is what you want to do. It's actually going to make it feel easier to push on, but you're only able to exert like 30 kilograms according to their diagrams when it's in the upper position. Now, I'm going to get it up to where it should engage the lever. I'm going to push this back in here. And this is where it gets a little finicky, and that is getting these washers, just like if you've been watching so far, getting these washers lined up on the outside so that they'll fit inside the grooves on both sides at the same time, and then move the pedal in or move the lever so that it engages the grooves. But at the same time, you have to pull this back, because if you don't, the lever is going to make contact with the preload bumper. It won't go all the way down. So it's kind of a little bit of a dance here to get this back where it was before. And I'm going to try to get it in here and just tighten it up a little bit. I'm going to run these bolts out a little bit, give me more room to get this back in here. And again, you have to make sure you keep this up so it'll fit down in between them. And I'm going to use this, see if this will work for me. There we go. Kind of a balancing act here. And of course, if these are already mounted to your base plate and you have them mounted to your cockpit, yeah, it's not going to be a lot of fun doing this, because you see it slipped back out again, so it won't go down. It's like I said, it's kind of a little bit of a dance here. And of course, you're probably not going to do this a lot, but if you are the kind of person that likes to play around and tune your pedals, this is not going to be a fun part for you when you do this. I'm going to turn around and show you guys what I'm doing here, and I'm going to pull this forward. push the pedal back at the same time. And if we can get it to go in. There we go. Now it went in. So I'm just going to get the wrench here and just snug this up a little bit. I'm not going to put a lot of torque on it, just to get it so it won't move, or it won't snap back out on me. That's the plan anyway. Just about that much. And I can still have room to move this. And it should still slide up and down, I'm hoping. Yeah, okay. And it also twists in the channel a little bit when you're sliding it. See how it twists back and forth? But you can just go the other way. Whatever way it twists, just push on the other side, it'll come on up. So I'm going to push this up to where it still fully engages that lever. And I don't get it to where it's not addressing the face when I press on it. So I'm going to look at this, and I'm right about at that point right there. So I'm going to go ahead and run these bolts back in on the sides here, try to get it so it won't move when I action it. Put a little torque on it, if you will. We'll tighten that up a little bit. There we go. And there it is. Now, you can see that the bumper is higher now, and when I press on the lever, it still engages the front of that bumper completely. That's what you want. If I go any higher, it's going to start catching the radius of the curve that's in that lever up in there, and it's just going to catch the front edge of the bumper. It won't catch the whole front of the bumper. So at this point, you can only put 30 kilograms of pressure on the load cell that's in here. And again, when it was fully down before, I could put 100 kilograms of pressure on it, because obviously, if I'm pressing down at the end of this long lever I have here, at the very end, I can put more pressure on that bumper down here than when it's at the current position. All right. Next adjustment is going to be, and I got to take this out again, replacing the bumpers themselves. And these are TPU bumpers. So, yeah, I'm not sure about long-term durability, but yeah, I think they give you at least four came with my kit, so that should keep you going for a while. And there's two different ones. We'll talk about those in a minute. But first, I'm going to pop this up and reach down in here and get that bumper out. It comes right out, no big deal. And there it is. And you can see it's kind of solid except for the hole running through it. And it has these curves to it, kind of a twist, a little coil there, if you will, like a spring. Although it might compress a little bit and help the feel of it. Now, they gave me these four here. This one is just like the one I took out. You see they both have kind of filled in the middle there. I don't know how well this is going to show up because it's such a bright yellow against the black gloves, contrast of gloves. But these other two they sent me are hollow, so they don't have the centers in them. Still have the holes, but they have the centers. And they have a filled-in H, what I would imagine it means hard. Let's see if I can get a reflection to show you that. And this one has the hole in it, so there's no writing on that. But this H, for these here, has filled-in sections. So we've got two, actually three, because one came with it. I've got three that are filled in. And I've got two over here that are hollowed out. And I would imagine the hollows are going to be easier to press. Now, normally when it comes to bumpers, I use my durometer here, and it's a Shure A rating scale to measure things. But this is TPU, 3D printed TPU. So this was never meant to measure that, and I tried to measure them, and they all were coming out the same. So I know that's not true. But because of how this is inserted in here, and we have this lever pushing on them, then obviously it is functional at that point. Again, 3D printed bumpers. You guys can make your own call on that as far as how long you think that's going to last with this metal pushing up against it. But then again, you know, if they're sending you four of these, I don't imagine you could wear those out too soon. And again, you can still change them around between the hollow and the solids to get a different feel. They say there's a progressive and a linear one, but they don't really state which one's which. What I'm going to do is take a solid H one and insert that back in, which I'm thinking that's going to be the toughest one there is. That's probably what I'm going to want, something as hard as I can get. And again, watch me take it out and put something lighter in once I'm actually using the pedal. Easy enough to get this back in, 2-finger job though. Oh, before I do that, I'll show you the load cell. There's the load cell down in there. See the white bits there? So the load cell is mounted to, is that just the plate? I don't know, that might be the load cell. I'm looking at it. It's part of the load cell assembly, no doubt, because you can see the cable. See that cable right here? Is going to that metal plate. So I imagine the load cell is mounted somewhere in there. And it should be obviously directly behind where the bumper is, where we're pressing. So I'm going to put this back on. Now we also have a little cover in the back here. And you want to make sure when you get this bumper in here that it goes into that indentation you saw, that circular indentation, so it fits. And it'll stay there if you get it there. Now on the back here of this, it's hollow in here where the cable comes out. And this is where the load cell amplifier board is located. We have a regular board located in here, but we're doing the amplification on a separate board here that sends it through the cable over to the USB board that also has circuitry for the hall sensors. Either that or the hall sensors themselves have the circuitry in it. Their board does everything they need it to do before they send the signal over to the USB conversion board. All right, so let's go ahead and get this back together, shall we? And again, I'm going to have to take these bolts and spread them out. So I got lots of room to play here. And again, it helps if you have a little something to keep the washers on the outside. I'm going to get my spacers back on here, if they'll stay. It's always be better if there was just like one spacer in here instead of these two separate ones, because they kind of want to separate on you when you're working on it. All right, so yeah, these. All right, now I got to move it. Remember, I got to swing it forward. And when you do that, you can see my spacers just jumped out again. All right, so let me push them back in one side at a time. I think we're almost there. Almost there. Okay, I'm clear on that. That looks good. There. All right. So now it went back in. Now I can tighten it back up. Again, a little fiddly here. Not the easiest thing to get these, but that, you know, with most of pedals that are like this, that have the spreaders and some two pieces of metal that gets pinched together, they're all kind of the same, because you're always having to keep one side from spinning the other. In other words, you need 2 wrenches to do anything. So if you need 2 wrenches to tighten it up while you're holding it, you know, you can make things a little tricky. All right. So now I've tightened this back up. This puppy's not going to want to move, right? So before I put this on my rig and I'm running it, I'm going to move that back down, because I want to get the 100 kilograms of pressure on this thing, not just the 30. And as it sits, it feels okay. It doesn't move much, but then again, load cell pedal usually doesn't move very much. All right, so any other things we want to talk about here? No, that's about it, I think. As far as adjustments go, the spring in the front, I guess I'll mention that. You see there's a metal spring pack in here, and that's what keeps the pressure on this. When it was popped out, it kept coming back to me. It has a 3D piece in here, a printed piece, probably PTEG or something like that. But the spring itself is not resting on the 3D printed part. There are bolts all the way around on both sides. In other words, they use bolts to sandwich this metal bits around the sides of the 3D printed part. Then we have the spring up here, but it looks like it could be resting on the 3D material, but it's not. The bolts that they're using here, you can see there's one right here on the lever. See, it's kind of snuck up under there. And this is what it's resting on, that bolt, not the, this is more like a cover function, if anything else, and a spacer at the same time. And on the bottom, the other part of the spring is resting on this spreader back here. You see that little piece of it going back there, and then there it is. So yeah, no worries about that. And that would not be a good idea to just have, obviously, some PTEG or whatever, even nylon, with the metal spring on it. All right, so that'll wrap it up for the adjustments on the brake pedal. This is the F1 base plate that 3Drap offers for their pedal set. And it consists of a single piece of 30 series profile. And to that, we have a 4mm bent aluminum plate here. And that's for the heel plate, obviously, so we don't hit the pedals when we're resting our heels here. And behind that, we have the main base plate mount. This is a 3mm stainless steel plate with slots in it for the brake pedal and the throttle. And on the back, we have this cool little piece here that has some holes in it two diagonal large ones and diagonally small ones, and that's for mounting the electronics box that has the USB plug on it. It has 4 bolts on the bottom, and you can see the holes there. I've got 2 out because that's the way this goes onto this. I'm going to show you how that works. So the 2 big bolts are going to fit in the big holes as locating, indexing type of holes, like that. Then we'll come back with the 2 bolts I took out, and these are M5 socket head cap units. And I would put those in here and tighten it down, and there you go. You got a nice secure location for your electronics box. I really like this because a lot of manufacturers don't think about where you're going to be mounting your electronics. So it puts it in a safe place, in other words. So it doesn't get banged around or you hit when you're trying to do something else. The overall stability before it gets mounted obviously is not that great because it's just a single piece of profile. A couple of things I don't like about this is it's a single piece of profile, and it's not a 40 series, it's a 30 series. A lot of people have 40 series cockpits or even 20 series. I'm sure there's some 30s out there, but yeah, I think the majority is going to be 40 series. And that creates a problem for your corner brackets that they don't include in the hardware for this. I have some 40 series corner brackets right here. And these will fit, actually work, because they had the long slots in them. They're longer than some of the other slots you see in some corner brackets. And I could put this up in between this stainless steel plate and the pedal base plate far enough to where it would not interfere with the profile I would be mounting it to. In other words, it would be flush with that line there. It wouldn't be sticking out like that. That's what I would call interfering. And I could do that because of the long slots, and I could still have just enough room, well, it's going to show up here, to get an M8 bolt into a T-nut that would be in that slot. However, if I try to go up to the front, I cannot do that. I'm stopped by the plates. And you can see if I'm stopped by the plate, it'll still bolt up. But now I've got this hanging out below the actual profile. If that was a 40 series, that would not be happening. So anyway, just wanted to show you that you know, I would probably put one here, put one up here. Obviously, I'd have to try to find a 30 series bracket for this, or maybe I could get a 20 with a longer slot or something to work. I probably have something that would make it work, but yeah, again, it would be a little easier if it was a 40. So you put one up here, imagine one back here, maybe one in the center. Depends on how you feel about how rigid or solid this would feel once you have it mounted. I think with 2 in there, a proper size corner brackets with T-nuts and bolts and everything secured, that it should be pretty solid. I'm sure they've tested this. And not only that, but we're not really moving it this way a lot. Maybe if we're just on the brake real hard, we'll have more pressure on this side, so it will have a tilting torque to it, or a twisting torque. But yeah, with some corner brackets in there and properly cinched down, I don't think it'll be a problem. I'm sure they tested this. I would have liked to have seen at least a 40 series profile in here, or some 30 series corner brackets with the kit. So we're going to go ahead and put the pedals up here and see what it looks like. Put them on at the same time so it won't tip over. And I'm going to put this all the way out to the sides. I'm looking down to see if I still have enough room, guesstimating here, for an M8 bolt. And it looks good right there, and right about there would be my max. So that's what it would look like. I think that's pretty good as far as, well, obviously they need to be switched around. I just looked at the bases. I didn't even look at the face where the pedal faces are. Okay, that looks better, Barry. All right, so yeah, you wouldn't want to run them that way, or maybe you do, huh? Make it more challenging. But that what it would look like. I think that's enough spacing there. What do you guys think? That should be plenty. And of course, you could actually get closer. I think our closer would be right there. Well, move this guy over a little. Yeah, right about there. So that's as close as you could get them. So again, if you had some kind of a F1 cockpit or something set up, then that would be narrow enough, I think, to get in there. And that might be another reason why they went with a single piece of profile. But they could have gone with a 40. All right, so I'm not going to be using this because I'm going to be using the 3-pedal set. I'm going to be using the GT base plate that they offer, and we'll get to that next. This is the GT base plate that 3Drap offers with their pedal sets. This is the assembly that I'm going to be using when I'm driving because I have a 3-pedal set. I've already shown you the F1 base plate if you're interested in that one. And this is similar to that. We have stainless steel heel plate mounted here with 4 bolts, and they're bolted to these flanges that are on these side pieces. So these side pieces have a flange here, and they have a flange back down here for the foot and one up there for the foot. But this is for mounting, and you can see how I did that. Very simple. And they provide you all the hardware to do that with. And I will be taking this back off when I mount this to my rig, because I won't be using the feet that you see here. Now, they did include the feet, so I thought I'd put them on there and show you guys what they look like. And they're about a little bit like 3/4 of an inch, about 19 millimeters thick or so. So that should be plenty if you need to be using the feet. I think a lot of people that get these are going to be mounting them through the holes that are where the feet are right now to whatever they're going to be mounting it to. I know I will be. But I just thought I'd just show you that. But to get to these holes, if I'm going to mount this, let's say I've already got the pedals mounted to the profiles here and set this down. I'm going to be wanting to get to straight down into these holes with my M8 bolt into the T-nut that's in the profile channel, right? So obviously this is going to cover that, so I'll have to take this off. And we do have some nuts on there I'll have to redo once I have it assembled. And that's just the way I'm going to do it. Obviously you could probably, yeah, see, there's just not a lot of room. You could get something in there, I suppose, and turn that and get it in your T-nut if you wanted to, but it's going to be a lot easier without this one here. Again, 3mm stainless plate here, 3mm stainless plate here. We have slots in the sides on the front piece, not in the back. That's just a hole, and that allows you to move this back and forth so you can adjust for where you want the pedals to be sitting at least a little bit. Now, these profiles in here are 30 series. Same as when I was talking about the F1 base plate, if you saw that segment. So these are 30 series, not 40 series. I would like to see some 40 series because that's what a lot of people use. If you wanted to mount this via these profiles to say a 40 series, then it would be sitting down like this, and you could actually do it because the corner bracket would be just about tall enough. I don't know how well that's going to show up. It's hard for me to show you exactly, but this sitting on the ground here, just enough room in here for an M8 bolt to go into this corner bracket. But these are long slot corner brackets, and a lot of corner brackets won't have a slot as long as that. But there's a way to get it done, in other words. That's what I'm trying to tell you. And then all the hardware was provided in their GT base hardware kit. I've already got the T-nuts preloaded because you want to do that. Once you get these sides on, the kind of T-nuts that they give you in this pack are not spring ball T-nuts. They're the tabbed T-nuts, as I call them. Grab one. And they have these raised areas on them that obviously are going to fit into this part of the channel. Just go down like that, which is kind of nice, actually. It's a nice locking feature, but the spring ball T-nuts have them also, but they're not quite as pronounced or as deep as this. So you're not going to be taking this puppy and trying to push it into the channel. You have to load it through the ends. So you want to preload all that you need before you start putting these side plates on. And on the back we have, similar to the F1 base, a nice plate for mounting the electronics box. And again, we have a large hole here and here to accommodate the socket head cap bolts that we leave on the box. I'll show you that. I've actually taken these out, and these are I got two of them here. This is the socket head cap bolt that came out of the back of this. See, I have one out here, one out there in that diagonal pattern. So we just simply set this down, however you want to do it. We'll do it with the logo pointing this way. And the bolt heads on the socket head caps drop into the big holes. And there's still a little bit of wiggle there, which was a good thing because we still have to thread these guys in on the bottom like this. Get this one in. And these are, the socket head caps on these are 4mm as far as your wrench size. There we go. And there you have it. A nice place to have your electronics box sitting, and you can come in and put your pedals in here and connect them to here. And then of course we're going to run the USB over to our PC. All right, so let's take a look at the pedals and how they're going to fit on here. We'll get the throttle first. And there's plenty of room here as far as when I adjusted the profiles. That little slot we have here. So they lined it up pretty good. Now, they're still a little twisted. The back one looks a little, it's not quite level, But as I tighten, and I'm going to leave these bolts on the sides, on these side plates that are connecting to these profiles a little bit loose, not totally torqued down, so that once I get these pedals bolted down, by the act of tightening these pedals down to these profiles, it will straighten them up because they'll be straight up against the flat part of the flanges we have on these mounting brackets. Like that. Then we'll come over here and let's see who's next. The brake over here. Get these cables out of the way. And then we'll come in with our clutch pedal. Like that. I'm going to put these to the maximum extremes as far as to the side. See what kind of spacing we have. And that's about it right there. Let me turn this around so you can see it. It just got a lot heavier. I'm going to put these pedals on. It feels pretty substantial. Again, all this stainless steel you would imagine. Yeah, it's pretty heavy. So that's the maximum spacing, and this is the extremes as far as the brake pedal can move back or forth. Do some heel and toe. I'm going to want it closer over here to my throttle. And I do like this throttle face because I can get my heel on it. Some pedals that just have like 3 of these on it, you're ended up having, when I'm heel and toe, and the way I do it, my foot rotates over there and hits like this with the heel. You know, that's why they call it heel and toe. And I'll be hitting the lever instead of a pad down here. Still works, but a little harder on your shoe. Anyway, that would be heel and toe. And I can move it over here for my left foot braking. And that would give me more room between the throttle and the brake. It gives a little bit more ergonomic as far as long stints. You know, the further away you have the brake pedal and the accelerator, the less angle you have coming in to your thigh bone, right, when it connects to your waist in here. Just one of those things I realized after doing a lot of laps and a lot of long stints that, yeah, it's better when the further I can get them apart, the better it's going to be. Or if you're just going to do 2-pedal race or something like that, you can always take the clutch off and really get some maximum room here between the brake and the throttle. So, and that's why I like the 3-pedal setup. Anyway, if I do want to run 2-pedal, it's going to be like a long endurance race. I'm never going to use the clutch, and I would do that. I just pull the clutch off, slide the brake over, and now I'm going to do an endurance race, right? So yeah, I like the way this went together. Again, I'd rather see some 40 series profile. Did have one problem when I put this together. One of the profiles over here, I believe it's the back one back here. No, it might have been in this one. It doesn't really matter. But the ends of the profiles are tapped with threads at their factory where they make these. And the threads weren't tapped further enough, or far enough rather, into the profile. So the bolt, once it runs out of thread in there, it just hits flat aluminum again, right? So it hasn't been cut with a tap. So I had to take my own tap, which is an M8, and cut it down further. So I had to insert the tap and keep turning it till it went far enough in to accommodate the thread length of this bolt. And then obviously clean up the mess, and then the bolt went in no problem. But if somebody else had pulled this out of the package at home and don't have a nice tap and die set, which everybody should have if you work on stuff, then you would be in trouble, because that's the only way to fix it, short of taking the bolt itself and cutting it shorter so that it won't bump into the aluminum more. That would work. But then again, yeah, you're still having to do stuff. Something, again, I would like to see done differently. And again, these, like all the rest of the stainless steel plates, they've left this little burr on them right here. You know, overall, the finish on this pedal set, it's a little bit disappointing to me at the price point. I would have liked to seen them finished a little bit better on the edges, because these burrs can actually cut you if you hit them in the right place. But yeah, I'm just here to tell you what I see, right? You guys make up your own minds. So that's how I'm going to be running this. Obviously, the brake pedal will be back over here, and I'll have the clutch because I'll be doing some heel and toe, because I always do that to try to put as much stress as I can on a pedal set and see how it responds to that. So when we come back, we'll have this mounted on the cockpit and see how it looks. Here are the pedals mounted to my cockpit. It went relatively smoothly. There were some hiccups as far as getting the heel plate back on. The trick to do that is to pull the pedals off the clutch and the throttle, pull them back off so you have some access to get down in here to get to the nuts on the bottom, because on my setup, I don't have any access down on the side and on the front like I just showed you there. If you look at the heel plate, it's covering, I'll go ahead and get this to come down here. You can see there's the profile, so there's really not any room to get in there to it. But yeah, easy enough, just pull the pedals back off on each side, and then I had some room in there to get to the nuts. And I have, which you can't really see it, but the front piece where the foot was now has an M8 bolt in it, just like the back does over here. Of course, we have the electronic box mounted. Very neat the way they do that. That is one big plus I give them, because a lot of manufacturers don't even take into account that you might want to put that controller, or whatever controller you have for a pedal set, in a place that's kind of safe and out of the way and supported. So I do like that. The pedals now feel different now that they're mounted to the cockpit, as you might imagine. I've been in messing with them a little bit, kicking them around, see how they feel, and they feel pretty good. The brake pedal I'm going to have to do some work with, but that's typical of any brake pedal that I use. Go ahead and round the other side here. Take a look. There we go. Again, the same deal we have over here as far as the M8 bolting down there. So everything feels pretty good. The throttle actually feels pretty good. It's smooth, as you might imagine, with all these sealed bearings and the assemblies. It is very smooth, and it feels better to me than I thought it would, to be quite honest. And the brake pedal, like I said, we're just going to have to work with that a little bit, but that's not uncommon for me to try to work the pedal into where I think it feels right, and it's getting the full resolution it should be getting. So there it is, mounted to the cockpit. Now all we have to do is get in and do some driving, and yeah, we'll just get to that. We're at Sebring in iRacing in the Lotus 79 for some heel and toe shifting fun, and we're going to slap these pedals around, put some pressure on them, and see how they respond. Now you'll see some movement in my entire chassis here. That's because I'm sitting on 4 actuators. It's a very heavy setup, being a 60OF actuator setup with 6 inches of travel, as you might imagine. So when I'm throwing my body weight around, you'll see some motion there, but it has nothing to do with the pedals. I can feel the pedals just as well as if I was sitting in a static cockpit, because even though the whole thing's moving, I'm not moving, and my feet are not moving in relation to the pedals themselves. I get questions about that, and that's why I wanted to say that. Now, the throttle pedal. It feels pretty good. It's a little bit light underfoot. I had it adjusted as tight as it would go, and it just felt a little light to me. I like to see a little bit more tension available there. As far as tactile feedback, it felt good enough. The aluminum plate that is the base for this throttle pedal seems to have a good area on it, and you could slap it around pretty good, but I really didn't get a good solid feel for the pedal when it came to the accelerator pedal. It was always really light under the foot, and being stainless steel construction with the cam system they have in that, I expected a little bit more, to be honest, but it was a little bit lighter than I anticipated. Now, of course, it did not keep me from driving the car as fast as I normally drive. Even though it doesn't go as far as the accelerator pedal I use in my everyday set, it did get the job done at the end of the day. And of course, that's all subjective anyway, what you like to feel in a pedal when you're using it. The brake pedal, we have that TPU, the 3D printed unit in there, and it was a while before I got adjusted to this pedal. It didn't really come like, some of these pedal sets, right out of the box, I get them mounted and I can come up to speed pretty quickly. It took me a little bit to get used to this brake pedal feel, and I adjusted it a couple of times here and there, and I never got entirely comfortable with it. But then again, that's me. I mean, somebody else could get in this car and everything is just fine with the brake pedal like that, and they love it. It didn't keep me from getting my threshold braking done, but the threshold braking was a little bit, I don't know, vague, and I really couldn't get it down into where I felt it was really, I felt like I was controlling the car in threshold. And of course, in trail braking, the same thing. If you can't really feel it in the threshold, then in the trail braking, which is actually a lighter feel and a nuance kind of thing, it translated to that section too. So I just couldn't get really comfortable with the brake pedal here for some reason. I'm not sure why. I adjusted a few times. It worked. It feels good under the foot as far as the pressure felt. It didn't feel bendy, didn't feel flexy. It felt tight. The feel of it is just something I just couldn't come to terms with. And I spent a few hours with these pedals trying to get it happen. Now, if I spend a couple more days with it, maybe a couple of weeks, sometimes it does take me, a while to come to terms with a brake pedal, especially if you're used to using another one. So the adjustments may be there for others, changing out the bumper, these TPU bumpers, or, adjusting the spring tensions, things like that. But again, just from my personal point of view, I just couldn't really come to terms with the brake pedal and get it exactly where I wanted it to be, even though I was able to do pretty close lap times with it as I could with the one that I use every day. Now, the clutch, well, the clutch was just the clutch. It doesn't have any special feel to it, even though it has that cam profile piece of metal in there running on that roller bearing. it just, you know, again, when I was doing the heel and toe, it just feels like you're slapping it around and just kind of slapping a pedal. Really not much else to say about that. Of course, most people are going to be driving like this, I think, with the left foot braking technique. And here, they do a fine job. Again, except for the vagueness, I really couldn't get that brake pedal to feel right. It felt stiff under the foot. The accelerator pedal, again, a little more travel would have been nice for my modulation of the throttle, but I was able to adapt, as most people will be able to. That's the funny thing about the human body. We can adapt to a lot of things once we use it enough, and we just get muscle memory, if you will, to make it work right for us. So I can't complain really about that, because it's kind of a subjective subject in that when we start talking about that kind of stuff. Now, underfoot, again, good tactile feel. This is a solid set of pedals under the foot. I didn't feel like they were like flexing any more than any other pedal set that's made out of stainless steel like this. So I really can't complain about that. The heel plate works well. The bracket for this pedal mount that they have is very good. Once you get it all cinched down and everything tightened down to your chassis, it feels very solid underfoot. And if you watch this and have been watching the video, you can see it is pretty solid. And you don't see as much movement, obviously, in the chassis now, because I'm not slamming around with the heel and toe technique. So you can see there's really no flex in any of that structure there. I sat and watched it for a little bit in the video to see if I could see anything. And yeah, they did a good job on that. It's a pretty solid feeling set of pedals. Again, I'm not really sure about this TPU bumper system they're using as far as durability is concerned. As far as feel, it felt okay, but it just kind of limits, I think, the amount of adjustability you have in a brake pedal. Even though they have two different ones you can put in there, you know, when you have a brake pedal that has like a stack on it that you can like put a spring in instead, or, you know, 3 or 4 different durometers of bushings or the bumpers in there, it gives you more adjustability range, as you might imagine, than just the TPU and moving it up and down inside the brake pedal like you saw those adjustments you can make. But then again, it's kind of a subjective thing. It's just one of those things for me that I'd like to see more range of adjustment to try to get it dialed in better than I could get it dialed in with what I had to work with. Other than that, yeah, I mean, it's a pedal set that gets the job done at the end of the day.
final thoughts on the Ngasa Pro pedal set from the guys at 3Drap. Constructed mainly from stainless steel plate with 3D printed parts used for spacers, electronics housings, and elastomer duties in the brake pedal. The fit of these pedals is very good. However, the finish on the pedal edges was on the rough side with some sharp burrs found in a few places. This is the second set of Ngasa pedals that 3Drap has sent to me after I asked them about the edges finishes condition on the first set. I was told that I'd been sent a pre-production set of pedals by mistake, and so that's why they sent me the second set of pedals. But the second set also has some metal burrs left on the edges, so I can't be completely sure what you will get when you buy a set. The brake pedal uses a load cell with a rated maximum foot pressure of 150 kilograms, which should be enough for most sim racers, I think. It uses 3D printed bumpers made from what looks to be TPU filament. This does give me some concern as to the durability in the long term, but you can buy more of them on the website if you need them. I was able to get a setting that allowed me to brake well enough to mostly maintain my usual lap times, but I never got it dialed in well enough to allow me to feel the critical transition from threshold braking to trail braking. Of course, someone else may not have that issue, as we all feel things just a little bit differently. The throttle and clutch pedals have Hall effect sensor setups in them, which should give them long life cycles. I was able to control the throttle pressure and modulation well, but I did yearn for a stiffer feel underfoot. It was just a little bit too light for me. This pedal set has a good mass to them, and the lighter than I like throttle pressure made it feel, well, just a little bit lighter underfoot than I expected. The clutch pedal has a cam profile to simulate your foot pushing through a pressure plate in the car's clutch pack. But as with most of these designs, the effect is neutralized under heavy heel and toe shifting. The pedal base that 3Drap offers for these pedals is also made from stainless steel plate. Once assembled, it does give you a nice stiff platform to use your pedals on. 3Drap does need to focus more on the metal plate's finish to come up to par with other pedal sets in this price point. I'm Barry Rowland. Thanks again for watching the Sim Racing Garage channel. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you would like to help support what I do here at the SRG, visit my website at simracinggarage.com.